Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm always grateful and glad to be able to be at this service. I'm so seldom invited is the problem. And so as I say that, I'm not the least surprised that you have me here on the holiday weekend. Thank you very much. You just feel the warmth and love by the leadership team of Modern Worship. So anyway, I am glad that you're here. And I know that I am with the tried and true and the remnant, the real people of faith, because you're here on the weekend. Yeah, give yourselves a hand. Everybody but Sam over there, maybe. But anyway, as I say all that, I do want to share with you a couple of things. Next week really is a big week for Wesley. We've got some opportunities of experience, both in small groups, Sunday school on Sunday morning, and particularly on Sunday morning at this hour and then again at the 11 o'clock hour. And we need your presence. I know sometimes, because I hear this from time to time, preacher, I don't know what it is that I could say. I don't know what it is that I can do. You can be present. Sometimes you don't have to say and you don't have to do anything. You just have to be present. And your presence speaks all the words that are of testimony of faith. I want to encourage you to select a service, tell someone to join you, and be a part of that experience September 11th as we inaugurate another opportunity to glorify God and be a witness to Christ in the world that desperately needs it so. Well, with that in mind, I just wanted to share a couple of scriptures with you this morning. In fact, it sort of got Lindsay and I were talking through the week, and then she just had so many obligations. She said, look, if you're ready, can you do all the services on Labor Day? I said, I'm not ready, but I can do all the services on Labor Day. And then I heard this morning she was going to use the 139th Psalm as some of what she would preach. And I just wanted to read a little bit of that, and then I'll read from the gospel lesson as well. Would you hear this morning from first the 139th Psalm? I'll just read a few verses, and you'll understand where I'm going. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know where I sit down and when I rise up, and you discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. And even before there was a word that was on my tongue, O Lord, you already knew it completely. You hem me in from behind and before, and your hand rests on me in between. The knowledge is too great and wonderful for me. It is high, and I could not attain it. Where, therefore, might I go from your spirit, and where could I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. And if I make my bed in Sheol, there you are. If I take the wings of the morning and settle the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. I remember the 139th Psalm. I've known it for a long time, but there is a difference between hearing it and knowing it, between thinking of the idea of it and the experience of it. My experience of the 139th Psalm came when I was in my middling year at Candler School of Theology at Emory University. I had hit some bumps in the road. The turns ahead felt sharp and dangerous to me. And so I went to see one of my professors that I had also known. He was not only a professor, but his two daughters were members of the youth group that I pastored at the time. Jim Fowler was his name. He would become the provost of Emory University. He was a graduate of Harvard, and he was in both undergraduate and graduate degrees. He would write a book about stages of faith that in that time was as well known, and then dementia took too early his life. But I'll never forget going to his office on a Saturday morning, completely bereft of any resource. And he didn't do what sometimes I think the church is want to do, and it never serves us well. Usually when somebody comes to me for a problem, they think that they want me to provide a solution, that if I could just offer this antidote, if I could just give this specific thing, if you'll just do this, or you'll just do that, or you'll just do this, it'll all work out like that. And I used to believe that that's what we were until I had teenagers. And they don't listen, and they don't care, and they won't follow it. And so really it's just a lot of gibberish and a lot of words coming out of my mouth that nobody hears. But he didn't do any of that. I didn't understand the wisdom at the time. He didn't tell me, if you just buckle down and study harder. He didn't say, if you would just get rid of some of that distraction, you would have a clear frame of thought. He didn't say, you just need to settle down and buckle down and do better. He didn't say any of that. You know what he said? He said, I like, in moments like that you're in, to read the 139th Psalm. And he read it for me. And he said, Greg, I don't have the solution to all your problems. But I know this. There isn't a moment of your life that God is ever absent of you. All you need is to know His presence. And He alone will see you through. Sometimes we're too busy explaining it to understand it. Sometimes we think we've got to provide the right word when it's only His presence that saves us. We have in the 139th Psalm the testimony that there is no place we can go, there is no experience that we can ever have that is ever absent of Him. And He alone is our rescue. He alone is our hope. God is present, and God is with you. You will not in a few moments be invited to share in morsels of bread and juice. But these are transformed by the power of God into Himself for yourself. Thanks be to God. I've always remembered the 139th Psalm differently because I was in James Fowler's office about 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning when I thought the world looked as dark as I could imagine. It wasn't, and God did. And I have always been grateful for a word of God that reminds me of God. Now the other text that I did want to do on Labor Day, and so I share it with you now. It's the 14th chapter. It's the Gospel of Luke. I read from the 25th through the 33rd verses. These words, that is the cost of discipleship. Now there were large crowds, and they were traveling with Jesus. And Jesus turned around to them, and He said to them, whoever comes to me and does not hate their father and their mother and their wife and their children and their brothers and their sisters and yes, even life itself, they can't be my disciple. For whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost of it, to see whether he has enough material to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish the work, all who see it would begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or what about the king who goes out to wage war against another king and does not sit down first and consider whether he is able, and there are 10,000 that are opposing with his army, and there are 20,000 that are against him? If he cannot then win, why does he still go? He instead sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So, therefore, none of you can be my disciple if you do not give up all that you have. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So this is Labor Day weekend, and so it's a good time to talk about our labor. And I'm always remembered the Charles Spurgeon, English preacher of another century, but he said something one time that I've never forgotten. He said, if you are called by God, never stoop so low to become a king in this world. If you are called by God, never stoop so low as to become a king in this world. If you are called by God, if you have that Spirit and it rests upon you, all that is necessary and all that you've ever really longed for is already satisfied. And there is nothing in this world. There is no office. There is no reward. There is nothing that can attain that simple feeling that God has called you in this moment for this time and for this place. Remember, as you think of who you are and what it is that you do, that there is no office so high that when you're called by God, you would want to bow so low as to become a king. I was thinking of that when I was thinking about what Jesus is asking his disciples here in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. 14th chapter of the Gospel of Luke is sort of halfway through. We're now at a different destination. Prior to the 14th chapter of Luke, we've had Jesus and he fed thousands. We've had Jesus and he's spoken to thousands at the Sermon on the Mount. We've had Jesus, and he has performed signs and miracles, the likes of which have not been seen before. And all of that has occurred. But it isn't as the fulfillment of the kingdom of God, but in preparation for what comes now. Beginning in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, Jesus encounters adversity one after another. There is disbelief, there is abandonment, and there is outright hostility that will take his life. And if he is not ready for the journey, then the ministry is incomplete. And so he says these startling words. If you don't hate your mother and father, if you don't hate your brother and sister, frankly, that's not as impressive to me as it is to some people. I raised teenagers. And they've often said, I don't think you've really had a real raising of your child until they look you in the face and say, I hate you, Daddy. I hate you. Or they don't say, I just wish my brother or my sister would just go away and leave me alone. Anybody ever have that? Raise your hand. You're in church. You have to tell the truth. You know it. You know it. It's there. It's a part of it. But what it is for a 15-year-old as a part of self-differentiation in a life stage, for Jesus, it means something else. We read these startling words and we say to ourselves, what in the world is he telling us? That we're to hate that which loves us most? That we're to reject that which we can't know? What Jesus is saying is that any other relationship, no matter how primary, no matter how important, no matter how valued it is, it does not compare to a relationship with God. And it cannot sustain you for that which is eternity. I don't know about you, but if you're like me, I care about what people think. I care about how it is. I still remember when we were living in Woodstock, Georgia, we were starting a new church, and I remember we had little kids, and we were new to the neighborhood, and everybody was new to the neighborhood. There was a guy who lived down the street from us. He was new to the neighborhood. He had a daughter. She was about the same age as my children, and so I was thinking about, introducing ourselves as we were talking in the middle of the street about about where we were from and what we were doing and all that kind of stuff. And he sort of told me what he did. And then, I could tell he was sort of asking me what I did, and I wouldn't tell him what I did. I just was interested in what he did because he was the brewmaster at the new Budweiser plant in Cartersville. I was really interested in all of that. How do you do all that? Anyway, but I just wouldn't do it. And, finally his wife said afterwards to my wife, listen, my husband's asking, does your husband work for the CIA or something? Because he just won't say anything. No, he's a Methodist minister, and he's afraid you won't let your kids come over to our house because he might baptize your daughter in the bathtub or something like that. And so, and it's sort of true. I mean, I knew what people thought. I just wanted to be a regular person. I just didn't want them to be all anxious or, to say a cuss word, or I wasn't worried about him having a beer, but short of that, I didn't care. I just was so worried. There was another time like that. I was, when I first came to Emory, you know my story. I've come from Los Angeles, West Coast, and I'd lived all my life there, and I just went to Emory because it seemed like all my rest of my life was there. At the time, college football was on a parity. Can I talk to you about what y'all did to Oregon yesterday? You should feel, yeah, wait. Well, where is Christian charity being evidenced in the state of Georgia? Seems to be a real lack of that, but that'll be a future. But anyway, so I'm over here, and we are, and I had every intention of going back to Southern California and living the rest of my life as I'd lived so far to that point. And then I met Ann, and she said she'd go anywhere in the world with me as long as it was in the state of Georgia. So that way into that. But anyway, I had this friend, and his name was Jimmy Aycock. And Jimmy Aycock and I had a lot in common. Well, not really so much. I mean, we were both from L.A. He was Lower Alabama. I was Los Angeles. Anyway, but we were buddies. We'd play basketball together. And he could be rough, but he was as straight and true as anybody I've ever known. Serves in the North Alabama Conference of the United Methodist Church still to this day. And when one day, though, he said, we're going to be doing something Friday night. We're going to go down to Peachtree Street. Well, even then I thought to myself, Friday night, I don't know that that's a real good idea. And then he said, yeah, we're going to go down there, and we're going to see all of the street people and all of the pimps and all of the prostitutes and all of the homeless, and we're going to minister Jesus to them. And all of a sudden, I had something to do on Friday night. I thought only trouble could come out of something like that, or as John Lewis used to say, good trouble. And I didn't go. And, this was a guy I'd played basketball with, and I would have, we'd play, we'd have classes together, we'd talk together, we'd eat together. But I didn't go. Now, Atlanta and its city wasn't saved because he went, and it wasn't lost because I didn't. But I always wondered what it was like if I had gone. What a difference it might have made. If not in them, of whom I would have ministered, in me, for the impact it could have made. But I wasn't willing to leave all that I had behind and follow him. This last Monday, I had a neat opportunity. I heard Henry Black. You probably don't know who that is. He is, or Barry Black, I'm sorry. Barry Black. He is the chaplain to the United States Senate. He said, to us preachers, you think you live in a divided world? Come to my place of business. 50-50. He said the only thing that makes it functional is that we have Bible study once a week. And did you know when you pray together, even as United States senators, you almost feel such love that you almost don't stab somebody in the back? Almost, he said. But prior to being the chaplain of the United States Senate, he was the chief chaplain for the United States Navy. He said, in that role, I was in charge of the spiritual influence of the 600,000 persons in the United States Navy. He said, in some ways, it's the pinnacle of my career for a kid that was raised by a sharecropper mom in South Carolina. He said, but one thing I remember, and it's this, he said, I remember one week when you're a Navy chaplain, you sometimes have to do a lot of funerals for enlisted present personnel and those that are retired. He said, in 1 week alone, I did 100 funerals. 1 week. Can you imagine? He said by the end of that week, I was about as emotionally, spiritually hollowed out, just pouring myself out on 100 grieving families and their needs. But she said, you know what was the thing that I remember now about that experience? All of that 100 people, it's frankly, he said, it's a blur to me. One after another, after another, after another. 15 funerals a day, every day. But he said, I remember one of them, and I remember only one of them. It was a 99-year-old enlisted man. And when I went to perform the funeral, he was a bachelor. And by 99, there were no nieces or nephews. And when I went to perform the funeral, I was the only one there. And if I hadn't been there, nobody would have been there. And the representative of Christ wouldn't have been there. On this Labor Day, make your life more than your work. Make it a purpose. Find that person. Encounter that place where if you're not there, the love of God is not proclaimed and God's love is not present. It doesn't have to be done with a sermon. It doesn't even have to be offered with a prayer. But you who are filled with the power of Christ are invited to share that presence with others. And if you don't do it, it might not happen. This is the purpose of our life. It is the measure of our calling, and it is the proclamation for why God has placed us in this time and this place. May we leave all that restrains us so that we might receive what God has charged and called us to, and without failure offer His faith. Pray with me, would you? Oh God, in the quiet of this hour, may we hear that we too are called in our life. May we respond to the initiative of your presence. May we proclaim it without fear and with no loss that there might be failure. For we are guided by your presence, built by your Spirit, and we are confirmed in your love. May that and that alone be what guides us ever forward. Robert Frost said it this way: only where love and need are one is the deed ever really done. There is work before you, and with the love of God, it will be made to His good pleasure.